Sup Wangers, how's it going? Hope you're all doing well. Welcome to episode 3 of the Magma podcast, a podcast where I discuss all the music that I'm involved in, from music that I am writing, music that I'm playing, music that I'm listening to, and music that I talk to my friends about. I'm in a new location. I'm actually in my garage. It's a bit cold, but I've got a lovely new setup. I think I may have mentioned before that I've moved into the garage, but all I'd actually done was just throw all of my gear in here and work around the space that was in it. But I've actually spent some time today making it quite nice. I've got a rug down here. That's how I roll. I've got a rug. I've had to find something to blur the background though, because it's a proper metal, not heavy metal garage. It is a heavy metal garage, but it's just a proper. It looks bad back there. But yeah, it's been a very interesting week this week. Lots of new music happening. I know I keep saying this in these podcasts, but I'm really not that far away from sharing something, and I'm gonna share something sooner rather than later. I'm not gonna kind of batch up too much before sharing, but I am gonna. There's a song that I'm working on which is very, very nearly finished. So I think it's pretty much written. I just need to. There's probably another couple of guitar parts that I want to add, re-record the vocals and stuff like that. And yeah, there's just been another flurry of activity this week, and not just in Wing Magma. We had a really good Bronze Age practice this week, where there was a spell of about half an hour where all of these ideas were just popping out of us, and I captured most of them. So there was just about 5 or 6 ideas. It was just let's just record that. So it's just there's something in the water at the moment. Lots of little bits happening. But this week's episode of the podcast, I recorded a conversation a few days ago with my good friends Tom Eve and Tim Carter. Together we are the Lone Wolves, and we've wanted to do a podcast for a while, where we pick an album and we pick it apart and discuss it, and we did that this week with Gaz Coombes' 4th studio album, Turn the Car Around. And this was it was good timing really, because I'd just been to see Gaz Coombes live at Rough Trade in Nottingham. I did post a live video at the time when I went there. Rubbish view, but it was a beautiful gig. He only played for half an hour. He played about 6 songs, and I was kind of furiously writing notes and stuff so that I didn't forget anything. But yeah, fantastic gig. I touch upon it in the conversation that you're about to see or hear, or both. And the album is, I've listened to it a lot since this recording, since the podcast, and it is definitely a grower. The themes, now that I found out more about what the album is really about, the themes are kind of staying with me, and I'm thinking about them when I'm not listening to the album, So I think that's a good sign of a good piece of art. But yeah, without any more messing about, here is the conversation with the Lone Wolves. Hey everyone, how's it going? I am joined this week by my deep and dear friends Tom Eve and Tim Carter.
Hi.
They are clearly labelled Who Is Who, if you don't know who is who. And we have been collectively listening to the new Gaz Coombes album. It is his 4th solo album, and it came out last Friday. Before we get into it, I just wanted to have a little bit of a scene setting as to what people's kind of knowledge on Gaz Coombes are. I know everybody knows that he's from Supergrass, but in terms of his solo stuff, Tom, what's your background with Mr. Coombes?
Your first point was my background with Gaz Coombes.
Oh, right. He's the guy from Supergrass.
I'm fully aware that he was the guy from Supergrass, but I have never, until this album, I've never listened to any of his solo stuff.
Have you listened to
not knowingly?
Have you listened to any of his other stuff since listening to this album?
No, I haven't actually. I've just been stuck into this. I will do after this, but this was my introduction to Gaz Coombes.
Cool. You know more about him than Tom does, don't you, Tim?
Yeah, we're like best buds, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I missed his first solo release. I couldn't even tell you what that was called. But Matador was where I sort of came in.
Yeah, I started with Matador. I thought that was his first, but there was something about the bombs.
Yeah, that's it.
Here Come the Bombs.
Yeah, which I probably only listened to once or twice. But yeah, Matador was my entry, and it might even come from you, Lloyd. I think you might have mentioned that album to me. I wasn't a huge Supergrass fan, but the first two albums, I had 4 of their albums, the first 4 albums, back when CDs were rife. But the first 2, I remember when I was like studying for GCSEs, I had those on a lot, and anytime I go back to them, that's what I kind of think about. And then I didn't know he had a solo career until Jay Marlowe told me about Matador. He was like, "Oh, Gaz Coombes has got a new solo album out." Didn't even know he was doing anything, and I fell in love with that album quite quickly. There's a lot of great stuff on that album, and it reminded me a lot of Tom York and The Eraser, but a bit more accessible, I thought. Yeah, although not to jump ahead of ourselves, but like there's a couple of bits in this new one that's like, oh, that's a bit Tom Yorky, a bit old Radioheady, and a bit Eraser-y.
Yeah, so I'd say I'm relatively a big fan of Gaz Coombes. I've met him.
I've met you.
I've got his signature on his 3rd album because I did a song. So like we went to see him. So me, Jay, and Pete went to see him last week as part of his album launch, because I completely forgot that he had an album out, and I completely forgot I was going.
Yeah, because we were going to do this call.
We were going to do this.
And it was just, oh yeah, I was doing that. And he did another signing at Rough Trade in Nottingham, but we didn't stick around for the signing because, in all honesty, I felt like such a tit, like just queuing up, waiting, and then have my selfie with Gaz Coombes, and then, could you sign this? I'm such a big fan, Gaz. And then so I didn't do that this time, but we got a free CD with our ticket, which is quite cool. So like that's the album. I don't think I mentioned it at the top of the call, but it's called "Turn the Car Around" by Gaz Coombes. So, guys, thoughts. So track number 1. Any initial thoughts?
Out of all of them, it was probably the most forgettable one on the album for me. It's moody, right? And I don't know it that well. I've only listened to the album maybe 5 times. But it was that, because it builds for ages, and then it kind of,
it's more of an introduction than it is.
Yeah,
like
it was just
a song. I get what you mean there.
But when it kicks in, so like, it reminded me of, remember Manson?
Yeah.
It had a Manson vibe about it, and I was a bit kind of like, oh, like I wasn't expecting that. And I don't know, my expectation for the rest of the album was probably jaded from that. Well, no, yes, sort of not quite where it was by the time I'd finished it, if you like. But yeah, so for me, like I don't know, it just felt as though it took a long time to get started, and then it kind of just finished. I was like, oh, okay. I thought it might have done more, and it didn't.
So I know what you mean. I thought like, I think now that it is a good opener to the album. I think probably the first couple of times I heard it, it was like, oh, okay. But then actually I listened to it when I ran the other day and like really focused on it lyrically, and I appreciate it more. So getting what he's talking about.
Yeah.
It's like quite a adventurous sort of song lyrically, like the thing that he's talking about. And that hooked me onto it a bit more. And I think listening to it in the context of the whole album, I think it is a really good way of opening.
So like for me, like the whole album washed over me. I listened to it a couple of times in preparation for going to see him, and my immediate reactions to the whole thing was, it's not Matador. Right? So I was kind of like, all right, okay. And when I went to see him, like he only played like for half an hour. It wasn't like a big gig. Yeah, he only played 6 songs, and it was just him and an acoustic. Played 4 songs off the album and 2 from Matador, and they all stood up. Like they all kind of had the same strength as the 2 that he played from Matador. So like after hearing them like stripped down, and it's just, you know, the 2 things that I enjoy the most about Gaz Coombes is his voice and his lyrics, and you start to hone in on things a little bit. And I tell you, I'll be 100% honest, listening to the Running Punks review of it really gave me a completely different perspective on the lyrical themes. That's where the weight of the album is for me, I think. And certainly like you can tie that back to the first track, because unless you're listening and like giving your attention to it and tuning into the themes, 50% of the album is lost. And I wasn't really doing that the first couple of times around.
I think that's probably where I'm kind of at with it. I've not given it enough time.
No, so like I wouldn't necessarily say it was time. It was just focus. And like, because I'd listened to it loads like before, but it was the Running Punks guy. So like props to him, because
Jimmy Watkins,
like, so he got it straight away. Like he was straight into it, and he was like, the way he was describing it as well, like
he has beautiful descriptive
very lyrical
talking about. Yeah, I've watched a couple of his other reviews, and just the way he I sort of figure, hey,
is he a Leicester guy?
No, I think he's Welsh.
All right, because you said Running Punks, and I thought Running Punks was a Leicester thing.
No, I think there are like local factions. It's just an online community of runners that don't join an actual running club, but want to be part of something. It's really cool. It's something to look into. But yeah, he like the way in which he described. He's actually got a new one out today, the new Billy No Mates album. Don't you know Billy No Mates? And yeah, I think what he does is probably sits down and listens to it a lot, writes notes, and then goes on his run. Because I thought first time I saw that, it was his like first reaction to listening to it. Like, how the fuck is he coming up with it? Was it not? No. Because then I've seen on Twitter since, like, he posts like a picture of his notebook and like the album, like the vinyl, whatever, and it's
okay,
like, ready to go out for my running review of whatever.
That makes more sense. Because
at first I was like, oh my god, how's he just completely dissecting this song and like describing it so
the descriptions, like if these are the things that just roll off his tongue, like wow, he'd be a great poet.
Yeah, well, he was a musician, so he was an athlete. He was a pro athlete, and then he was a pro band dude, and now he's a amateur athlete music reviewer guy. Yeah,
but yeah, like, so I don't think I would have the same appreciation of the album had I not had listened to his review. So I owe him a shout out and a thank you. So that like my initial, like, because I've written down like my initial thoughts, nowhere near as lyrical. They're a little bit more factual. So like it was. You don't usually hear his baritone voice. He never usually sings. Blah, 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 blah. He's usually quite high. So that was kind of like an initial kind of, oh, this is new. And it's all kind of moody and twee and dark and stuff. I initially got, and I don't know if it's because I just kind of assumed going in that this was going to be his COVID album, like as in like he'd written all of this during that time, so I was already kind of tuned in to certain things. I can't remember what he actually said that made me think in that first song. I've got his lyrics here, because like, remember lyric books?
Oh wow!
Albums.
Oh wow!
Yeah, there was
You used to sit there and you used to just,
yeah.
like, that's how you learn. Like, you really got to know an album, right? You just sit with the, or if you bought a CD and they didn't have the lyric bit, then you just be like, oh.
Yeah. So like, so there's lines in here. Well, there's change on the rise. Stay inside. Let's climb the walls again.
Mm-hmm.
And that made me think, all right, okay. And I think that kind of inflection is thematic throughout it. Next song on the album, Don't Say It's Over. And this is another thing I like. So doing my research, he's already released 4 singles off this album.
Yeah,
only 9 songs.
I had a look on YouTube today, and like there's like 3 or 4 music videos for before the album.
But like he was releasing them last year, which again I wasn't really aware of, even though I had tickets to go see him. And there's only like 5 fresh tracks on the album for those that have been listening to him. So yeah, so Don't Say It's Over. He played this at the show, and again it was just kind of, I don't know, perhaps I was just a little bit more engaged because it was just him and a guitar. But what were your guys' thoughts on Don't Say It's Over?
Honestly, you know what, I've written something against most of the tracks. I didn't put anything for this, and I think back, I can look at the names of some of those songs and go, yeah, I can sort of know how that goes in my head, and I can think what I think about that. But this one sort of passed me by a little bit, in all honesty.
It piqued, I suppose, it piqued my interest, this one, because it's very different to the one prior to it, right? It's a bit more lively. It's got that sort of ongoing sort of, there's that sort of electronic sort of riff that goes all the way through the song, right? Yeah, but it carries on from memory. It's not just something that plays in the chorus. It's like it's throughout the verse, it's throughout the chorus, and it's quite, and then it cuts out, and it's got that kind of I'm trying to picture it, but you're right, it kind of, I don't know, there was something about it where I was just like, this is a bit more sort of uplifting, I suppose. And it was a bit more, it caught my attention rather than me sitting there thinking, oh, I don't think I'm going to enjoy this as an album. I was like, oh, I can get into this. It's got like because I'm not familiar with him.
Yeah.
There is something really weird about listening to that album. And this was the first sort of point where it kicked in for me. Where I was just like, there's something really sort of nostalgically familiar about listening to Gaz Coombes.
Yeah.
Not in that kind of like cheesy nostalgia way, but there's that kind of, there's something really 90s and British about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've felt that throughout a whole bunch of songs, but this was the first time I sort of got some of that when he was singing. I was going, oh no, that's the voice, right? Like, you could pin, if you go right, Britpop, you could just say Gaz Coombes singing. That was kind of, I was just like, oh, okay. But it's not it doesn't sound like a 90s album at all, but it was the sort of first.
No, it's got, his voice is incredibly characterful, and Like you could, this track, in my opinion, could have been on one of the Supergrass albums and not really felt that far out of place. So I get what you're saying. And I was listening to, when I got to this track earlier, like I get, like it did sound familiar to me, and it's very much in his style. So like for somebody that's not familiar with him to hear something like this, like you kind of don't know all of his traits and his kind of signature bits, but this is his vocally, this is his tone. This is where he sits quite comfortably. Some of the guitar sounds are quite like these little kind of piercing solos that just kind of smack in and out sort of thing. That's very
it's sort of, because it sort of peppers in and out with those sort of like tiny little solos, and like the song obviously sort of lifts and drops as you would expect with a song, but it sits within quite a tight remit. It doesn't sort of explode and then come back down, explode and come back down.
Yeah.
And it happens throughout the whole album, right? Everything sits. What it felt to me as though everything sits from a range of about here to here, but it's enough. Like you know that it's doing what it needs to do, but it doesn't sort of just erupt into chaos, and then sort of bring itself back in. And it was. It changed my opinion quite quickly from first track to second track. I was like, I can get on with this.
I don't want to distract from the album itself. In fact, well, this won't distract, but have you heard of Tim's Twitter listening party? Not me, Tim Burgess from the Charlatans.
All right, no.
So I think he started it in lockdown, and he has an album, and he'll play it or it'll be on the website. It plays from, I don't know, like 8 o'clock or whatever, and you can go on, you can listen along live, but whoever's album it is will be on Twitter and tweeting throughout. They'll be part of the listening party.
Oh, wow.
And they did this album earlier this week, so Gaz was on Twitter as they played and tweeting about each track. So I thought it could add a bit of context to each song. So for Don't Say It's Over, it was the first track he recorded in his new studio, and apparently it's a much bigger space than he's recorded in before. So he was using this track to experiment with the ambience of having a bigger space, and that was his approach to the sonic approach to this particular track.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
The last note that I've got on here is snare goes on for days. So yeah, like that's quite cool. The next track, Feel Loop, Lizard Dream in brackets. Again, this is another single. This is the first one that really reminded me of Tom York.
Mm-hmm.
I have this.
Yeah, glad we all picked up on that, because there's certain phrases in the melody where it's all kind of one note in a rhythm, where it could be on the Eraser, you know.
Yeah, and it's got those little breaks, those little sort of breaks for the guitar in there as well, and you just like that. And I'm not comparing it to the song Paranoid Android, but it's that kind of, you know, the when the guitar kicks in at the end of Paranoid Android, like the middle, and it sort of goes into the like rockier, heavier part of Paranoid Android, and it felt as though it was going to do, like, it kicks in, you think, oh, it's going to do that, and it does it like 2 or 3 times in the song, and it doesn't really go to that level at all, but I quite like the way that it just sort of jumps in and jumps out, and it was I really enjoyed this song. I was like, I started to be like, oh yeah, these again, like this is getting better for me. Like it was, and yeah, I picked up like Radiohead straight away. I was going, this could easily be, like again, I haven't given Tom York solo stuff much of a listen either, but
the Eraser's pretty decent. Some of his other stuff is quite challenging, but the Eraser's really good. And I think there's plenty of comparisons to be drawn between Eraser and Matador. Like they're from the same place and things like that, and they used to be in the same kind of scene, like when they were smaller bands and stuff like that. But not that that would have that much bearing on what they're doing now.
Yeah.
But
I've also written down that there's I can't remember it off the top of my, because I don't know it well enough. Like they're not, you know, they're not ingrained like melodies and riffs and everything in my mind. But I've got like, there's a cool groove throughout the whole song, and it just stays at that level.
I almost vommed in my mouth when I wrote it down, but I did write groove.
Yeah, I didn't think of anything else to write. I was like,
Yeah.
what is?
It's
what
got
is the
yeah,
one?
it's got a real good bass hook, and it's got that kind of groove, like literally.
That's what else
like,
do you call it?
groove.
That's the word.
Groovy, baby.
But it just there's it is this song. I think it's towards the end, and I don't know whether it's been like it the whole time, but the bass becomes more prominent later in the song. And there's a point I was listening to it going, that sounds exactly like something else, and it was right on the tip of my tongue, but I cannot remember what it is. But I was listening to that going, again, like with that nostalgia thing, I was going,
there are quite a few moments in this album where I've done that, and all of them have been, that reminds me of something, but definitely something else to the other thing that reminded me of something. But that, like, I noticed myself doing that sort of more.
It's just like there's like some subtle nudges just happening in your brain going, remember that song? And you go, oh yeah. Like you could fall down a massive rabbit hole after listening to this. You go like off in loads of directions going, you've just reminded me of this. It's reminded me of this. Again, like a nice little nostalgia trip, but not in a real cheesy way.
I think I got to around this point, and I was trying to compartmentalize what music does Gaz Coombes make, and I'm starting to struggle, because like it's quite eclectic. There's something very British about it, but it's just like, what genre is it? You know, it's definitely, it's not an indie album.
No.
But I wouldn't want to say it was like a rock album, because it's not.
It's a groove album, man.
It's a groovy album, man. But like, it's hard to say what it is. Like, but that like I say, that I started to get genre confused by this point. Not in a bad way at all. I think it's very eclectic.
Yeah.
And
this
the
one got me
instrumentation's
back.
quite.
This one got me back.
You could easily state what it's not, but to say what it is, I think is impossible.
Yeah.
Which is good.
Ooh,
Yeah.
nice. Like that.
Yeah. This is one of the highlights of the album for me, definitely. I really like this track. I sort of felt exactly the same thing. Radiohead, Tom York, similar vibes. And then how you were saying somehow a Radiohead track like Power Android would then go into something sort of heavy and a bit crazy. This sort of, when this did go into stuff, it reminded me of like Dandy Warhols and Beck and that kind of groove. But I really liked it. This listening back to this one, I sort of look forward to this, and we'll get on to the track after coming on. But this sort of little middle section is quite a highlight down for me.
Yeah.
From a listening party point of view, this came from a weird loop that he found from a session when the guitar was plugged in, and he liked it. So they jammed on top of the loop with the drums and then took it from there.
Nice.
And they recorded it last Christmas, and apparently they were watching Gremlins when the guitar solo was in full flow.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was a fun session. Apparently.
Awesome. So, track number 4, Long Live the Strange. This is like I wasn't aware of any singles prior to the album, and I would have said this was the most accessible of all the songs on there.
Yes.
It's got a very
100%.
very catchy chorus.
So is this song? So the first listen I gave this was Wednesday morning. I was on the bus. It's like early. I was getting an early train to London. So I was on the bus at like 7 o'clock in the morning. It was freezing cold, dark, and I put this on, and I hadn't really paid attention to it at all by this point. And then this song came on, and it was like I'd started listening to the album at this point.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't even tell you why. It's like all of the melodies, the riffs that were happening, like, because there's quite a lot of different things happening, and they just tick all of the boxes to just be a really good song. Like that's what it is. It's just a good song, and everything.
Do you ever get that thing where you hear a song for the first time and you go, "I've heard this before," but you know you haven't?
Yes.
But it's almost recognizable as an entire piece of music. You go, I know this. I've never heard it before. That was my initial reaction to this track. I was like, straight up, this is a banger. I like this song a lot. This is definitely
this was a highlight of the solo show, because it's just really easy to participate. And I think he said something about it at an introduction to the track to say that there's a like a very singable chorus, and he said, have you heard it yet? And then like most of the crowd would because we saw him on the Sunday, so it'd been out a few days, so people had already knew it. And he was like, do you know it yet? Are you sick of it yet? And all this kind of stuff. But people were singing along in the chorus, and it just felt very comfortable to do that. It's a very easy,
very catchy, very easy on the ear. It's not it doesn't go off in weird sort of directions. It's predictable in that sense. Not that it's a simple and easy song, but it's a predictable song. And that's not a negative, because actually that's what you want in a whole bunch of stuff. Like Kings of Leon have made an entire career out of being
it's
great and predictable.
It's like comfort food, isn't it? In the middle of the experimentation, it's just like, right, okay, this I don't have to think too hard to enjoy what this is.
I found myself, and every time I've listened to it, just doing this.
Oh, it's totally stuck in my head right now.
Yeah.
Unanimous.
Yeah. I think
the running punk guy, I've already forgot his name, but the running punk guy, he compared it to electioneering, didn't he?
Yeah.
In his review, I was just I can kind of get that.
Yeah.
It's a similar rhythm, and it's got a similar kind of vibe to the guitar. Electioneering, the Radiohead song off OK Computer.
You'd know it.
Yeah, I would. But that might be where you've got it from.
Yeah, true. I think something I thought about this track, right, was lyrically risky in a way that it could be quite cliched to talk, because it's about inclusion and diversity and being yourself and all that. And I think as a concept lyrically, that could quite easily run into cliche. And I think it avoids it by, I don't know, I don't want to be derogatory about it, but almost sort of skimming the surface of it and just having quite a straightforward black and white powerful message. It was just, give a fuck if you're strange, don't be you, man. I like that.
Literally the first thing I wrote was, I really like this song.
That's just quality journalism. I really like it.
I really like this song.
It's good.
I'm skimming the surface, right? It's the first, it's not just a new album. It's a new. It's not like how I pull apart a new Metallica song that's come out, which one did come out today. Not as good.
Did it?
Yeah. Don't be excited. My opinion is it's not the one that came out before. But do you know what I mean? The way that I listen to and sort of just delve into those is so different, because I know that band's that back catalogue, and whereas this is just a new experience for me altogether.
I think it's good to have a fresh opinion as part of this. If we were all fans and we're all geeking out about it, that would be. And there's definitely going to be albums that you guys know better than I do, and and tra-la-la. I think it's fine.
But it's that kind of so my take on this while I'm listening to it is very is just very on the surface. It's just what am I getting from it right now, or I have to, because I think it's really hard to just go right, let's pull this apart. I'm going to listen to this. I want to check that. And it's just like, no, I'm going to put it on in the background. First couple of listens, I'm going to see what piques my interest, and then I'm going to try and remember what it is, or like try and note down what it is that's making me go, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. And if it doesn't pique my interest and the album finishes, oh dear. Short review. I completely missed this while listening to it, but that didn't happen. But it was this that kicked that in for me.
So the next song, Not the Only Things, I bet he had quite a bit to say about this one on the Twitter club thing. So I just getting hyped for the gig. I was watching interviews with him on YouTube promoting like the album and stuff like that, and he said that this is a spiritual check-in with his daughter. So on Matador there is an absolute classic track called The Girl Who Fell to Earth, and it's such a beautiful song. It's one of my favorites of his, even more so that he's writing a song about his daughter. So The Girl Who Fell to Earth is his daughter. She suffers from autism, and he's kind of just, the song's not about her autism, it's just about her soul. And he said that this is she was 12 when he wrote The Girl Who Fell to Earth. So this is a bit of a spiritual check-in on where she's at and what she's up to now. And it ties into some of the themes of this album, which I was going to kind of get to at the end in terms of what I've taken as the themes from the album. And you can hear it in his lyrics in places about different versions of yourself in terms of your perception of yourself, what you tried to project, who you think you were. These are all versions of yourself, and he kind of flitters between them. And with this track, I can kind of see him trying to advise his daughter about where he thinks she could go, but she can't see it because you never do in your own life. It's always easier to kind of look at somebody else's and say, no, don't worry about it, you don't need to worry. It's just like, that doesn't help me, of course I'm going to worry. Do you know what I mean? So like I think this is another great song, and I love the kind of legacy that he's building with his music. Same guitar tuning as The Girl Who Fell to Earth, so there's parity there. And I think what a wonderful thing to do, to kind of try and document your daughter's journey. I just thought it was fantastic.
That's what I didn't realize. He considers this to be the third in a trilogy of albums that started with Matador. I didn't realize. Yeah, I read that today. Matador, and what was
the World's Strongest Man.
Yeah, and then this is the third in a trilogy. And I think that thread of that story through, I don't know the World's Strongest Man very well, and I don't know if there is any sort of tie in there to.
There might be. I've not gone as deep into it, like I because I've got it, and I have listened to it a lot, but again I was more disappointed by it than I was entertained.
Instant Matador comparison. Yeah, he said about this almost exactly word for word what he said. He sees it as a spiritual follow-up to The Girl Who Fell to Earth. Always thought that this would be the anchor of the record, sitting right in the smack bang in the middle, and very much looking forward to playing it live. Did he play this?
No.
When you saw him?
No, he didn't. So, but yeah,
to be fair, you saw him with just him and acoustic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, to be fair, he said he's looking forward to playing it with the band. So.
Cool. Well, that makes sense.
There you go.
Any thoughts, Tom?
I mean,
you wouldn't have got any of that.
No, I got none of that. I remember, so when this came on, I genuinely, for the first 2 minutes, thought that I was listening to a Radiohead song.
Yeah.
the tempo, the the drums when they're in there, like everything about it, his voice, like, and I know that you called it out and we talked about it before, like how that sort of haunting Tom York sort of sound that he has, like for the first, well, maybe not 2 minutes, but a minute and a half. I was just like, this sounds exactly like this could be a Radiohead song, quite easily could have been a Radiohead song. And then it changes, obviously it lightens up, the strings kick in, and his vocals shift, like he goes more to sounding like, well, not like Tom York, and it becomes a very different song. But especially to start with, my take on that was going, like, is this someone? It felt as though I'd jumped to another, you know, like when you listen to a song on Spotify rather than an album. Yeah. I was just like, if I just clicked on the song and it's gone recommended songs and playing me someone else's song, it felt so different to the two prior tracks, if you like. I was a bit like, it was perfectly enjoyable. It's not a negative. I was just like, I did not think that was him. It was
fine.
It was fine. Fine.
So then we come on to Turn the Car Around, the title track of the album. I haven't got many notes on this, but it's kind of, you know, it's very in keeping with, you know, the thematic threads throughout the album, hence it being the title track of the album, I guess. And there was a line in there that I've written down the start of the line that I really, really liked, and I'll find the whole line in his lyrics. Where is it? But echoes find us when the hurt runs out. So he's talking about, I think it's his mother. Like I think he's lost his mother, and he's talking about, you know, I want to turn the car back around. I want to go back. I want to return to where we were. And
it was that song where I was just like, this is it. This song could have been released in 1996 and it would fit perfectly.
This is one of the tracks where I went, and there's only probably 2 or 3 in here where I went, oh yeah, it's Gaz Coombes from Supergrass. Yeah, that's right.
I don't have many notes on the next song, This Love.
I actually put meh on this
I got quite a jazz vibe from this, like an Amy, you know, like the Amy Winehouse kind of. That's what I got from this in parts. It's got that like bass, the bass line going through it was quite sort of not like jazz flute jazz, but like it had that it reminded me of that kind of Amy Winehouse, and there's that new woman now that's going on tour with Lewis Capaldi, very similar sort of style, and the way that I caught some of the, I don't know, I didn't go into the lyrics and what he's saying, but the way that he delivers some of those vocal lines had that kind of you know, that sort of lazy throwaway tone that that kind of genre has. It's like almost conversational. But
is
like
this the one where he says like Romeo and Juliet, except we both survive? Except we both survive.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only notes that I've got here is great / simple bass hook.
Yeah. It was a
That's it.
but there's a really nice bass hook going through that.
So no strong feelings for This Love from any of us. All right.
Not so much.
Perhaps it's a grower.
I think more generally this album, I think if we do these in their new albums that we've not heard before and we listen to them 2 or 3 times, there'll be some that I think we'll listen to, be okay, and then we won't listen to it again. I do feel with this that I will listen to this album after tonight.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I think some of these songs will grow on me more, definitely.
So the next song is a contender for best song on the album for me, Sonny the Strange. He played this live, and that was when I really felt the story in the lyrics, to a point where I googled it to see if Sonny the Strange was an actual person, and he's not per se, but he is based on a person. So I did Google about. There was an article. I can't find it now.
That's all right. It was based on Randy Turpin,
a boxer,
a British boxer during the 50s. Yeah, who had a big rise and then a big fall. Yeah, that was and like back to the lockdown and COVID times. He said he was watching a lot of documentaries during that time, and that's where he came across that story originally, and immediately went.
Because there's some sports commentary audio in there, and that's why I thought, perhaps that's a clip of, and it might be a clip of the Turpin guy.
Yeah, I don't know actually. It could be. But yeah, your opening sentence about this track was exactly what I'd written down. It's in my top 3 on the album, definitely. And again, I just wrote story in capital letters. I really like the story element of this track.
This is what he started the show with. So he must feel relatively confident, with it, and it is one of his many singles from the album, so that's quite cool. And then the last song, right, so the first couple of times I've played this through, so the last song is called Dance On. I didn't realize that the album had finished, right? So if you listen to it on Spotify, you get radio, and I was listening to 2 or 3 other tracks before I realized that the album had finished, because it doesn't really conclude. It doesn't really stop. It just, it just, do you know what I mean? There's no kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Crescendo to, to
dramatic close to the album.
It just ends. And I don't know, in hindsight, I quite like it, because in terms of the themes of the album, you'll just move on to something else.
Yeah, it carries on. It's not.
Yeah,
I think it was quite. It wasn't. You're right. It's not really quite. It's not a crescendo kind of album-ending song. One of my notes was it's very soundtracky. It's like one of those ones that could just be in the background of something that you're watching as soundtrack. And it's much more dulled down in tone and everything. I got a real sort of 60s, 70s, late 60s, early 70s sort of British folk vibe, and also a bit of the Beatles in there. That's the kind of sort of tone that I got from listening to that, and it was a bit kind of left field. I was like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that from it, but it sent me there into the 60s and the 70s, really.
There was a line in it, it was something about him, I've not written it down and I can't be bothered to find it, but it was something about it's him or me, and I'm pretty sure he was talking about himself in both of those instances. Do you know what I mean? And that, so it's the themes are clear, and there are many kind of golden threads throughout it about self-inflection and how you perceive yourself, how you project yourself, how you compare yourself to other things, but which version is the right one. And it was, I don't know, that's so when I was at the gig, I did a little live Instagram thing from the gig, because all I could see was the wall. Right? I couldn't get round to see him. And Tiernan sent me a message saying, "Play We Are Young." That would have been a good heckle. Have you guys given it a star rating out of 5?
I went pitchfork styly and went out of 10, but didn't go into the decimal places that they go to. I've given it a 7 out of 10.
I've given it a 3.5.
I think that's
and Tom given it a 3. I think
in fitting with my turtle outfit. See,
your number of fingers. I think in time I'd feel stronger about it. And that's what happens with great albums. Like, they live with you for a bit. They're not instantly right up there, But I do I'm with you, Tim. I think this is going to be
a grower, not a shower.
Yeah, it's definitely going to have a life outside of this week for me, for sure.
It's already made me go back and listen to Matador this week, and it will make me go back and listen to The World's Strongest Man and check out that first album.
Dog Me.
I'll probably give Matador a listen, as I've not even heard that. So
definitely,
Matador for me is definitely in my top 20 of all time, possibly in my top 10. Like, it's a.
And we've talked about top 10 albums a lot, so there's some. I mean,
well, there's about 150 albums in Lloyd's top 10. So
there is, yeah.
But it's up there.
One thing that would be remiss for me not to mention is that he also sings my favourite Christmas song.
Oh yeah,
Gaz Coombes. I Believe in Father Christmas. I think was it Greg Lake that did the original? But there's a video on YouTube of Gaz performing it in Adam Buxton's little garage studio bunker thing, and Adam's playing a little. I have no idea. You probably know what the instrument is. Some weird little stylophone type thing. But it's really, really nice.
I've heard, you've told me this before, and like that when you put that on, it's the start of the festive season. But I've not listened to it for a good couple of years. I'll have to give it another go.
Should have been on the album.
All right, so the average mark, I'm just gonna say it's 3 out of 5. All right, that's the Lone Wolves rating.
It's fine.
It's fine. There we go.
It's good. It's good.
It's better than fine. It's good. 3.5. Brilliant.
Stick that on your tour poster, pal.
Right, well,
fine.
Guys, it's been a pleasure, and thank you for being part of this podcast. Can't wait for you guys to be on the next one. Take care of yourselves. Speak soon. Awesome conversation. Love those guys. I think that's going to be the first of many. I think we're already talking about what we're going to review for the next Lone Wolves version of the Wing Magma podcast. I hope you guys enjoyed that. There's more music coming up in the post. Actually, tomorrow at the point of recording, we're having an all-day band practice for Bronze Age. So we're meeting up, and it's going to be like going to work, but instead of going to work, it's going to Bronze Age. And like, there's, as I've been alluding to, there's a lot of ideas flying around. I think we're just going to dedicate more time to actually getting them down and getting them shaped and structured a little bit more. So that's really cool. I'll probably post some pictures on Instagram from that. Yeah, I am just rambling now, so I'm going to wrap it up. At Wing Magma on YouTube, at Wing Magma on Instagram. Get involved. Send me a message if you want to chat about anything. Hit me up. I would love to speak with you. Take care of yourselves. Speak soon.